I'm Shivani Gupta, and welcome to the Ask Shivani podcast. I believe that one of the best presents that you can give yourself is time to be able to sit down and ask yourself some questions. I believe that the quality of the questions that you ask yourself will determine the quality of your life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ask Shivani podcast. One of the questions I have been getting over and over and over again from clients has been really around how to retain their sales staff. So what I wanted to do was I'm going to write a bunch of information about it on a blog. I'm going to do a LinkedIn Live around that, but I also wanted to do a podcast depending on how you access the learnings and information and wisdom that I share with you. And I wanted to talk about 7 different ways that you can try and retain your sales staff. Now, this is specifically to sales, but you could also apply this into other people as well, depending on the industry that you're in. Obviously, some places are starting to lose people everywhere. I had somebody who's in the retail space, and they said, look, if you lost somebody, that was on $25 an hour, and you lost that retail employee, just to actually be able to look at the turnover rate of some of what's happening in retail, which is over 50% of the turnover at the moment. When you look at, and you've got people that are 10 people, and you're going through that is, almost $100,000 in terms of training that you're going to lose, rehiring, and the cost of non-retention is extremely high. Salespeople and really good salespeople are so key depending on what business that you are running, and losing them, perhaps the numbers are even greater in terms of what occurs. So the first tip that I have for you is how to actually get your salespeople to actually input into the products and input into the customer service that they might be having. So for example, if there's a particular product that's not moving off the shelves or online, depending on what service and product that you are offering, one of the things that would be great is to be able to incorporate conversations that are structured and recorded with some of your key high-performing salespeople and say, hey, this isn't moving. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your viewpoint is. Great salespeople, that's a great strategy in terms of being able to engage them. Doesn't mean that their story will be absolutely right, but getting their perspective, getting their data, their backstory in terms of why not it's happening might become really critical in terms of being able to move those sales, in terms of being able to have that. So for example, I know that there are clients that will say, hey, we're a retail store, we do clothing. And one of the things that we do is we've noticed that certain sizes are moving very fast, but others aren't moving very fast at well, or certain colors are moving very fast and others there. And so one of the things that occurs is that talking to the salespeople, one of them talked about the fact that certain times of the year, people will actually start buying clothes that are a little bit smaller size, particularly around the beginning of the year when they've joined gyms, etc. And even that sort of data to know what to market when comes in really handy. The second thing which I'm going to talk about, it sounds like it's a bit of a given, but so many organizations don't do this very well. And that is to give your salespeople excellent training, constantly training, and constantly reinvesting in training. Not thinking, okay, I sent them to this course cost me $5,000 and there. Doing actually more investing in retraining and doing smaller amounts. If your budget is say $5,000 per person per year, or even less or more, rather than doing it in one lot, one of the things that organizations are noticing is that if that money is spent over a period of time and you sent them to one thing a quarter for about a quarter of the cost, so it's not costing you more, that's going to be much more effective than a one. I know one of the things I love and that I read about constantly is Costco. Costco is a retailer that often exclusively only hires corporate workers. And one of the things that they report is that they're some of the happiest people on the planet. And one of the things that they do is hiring from the floor gives them a really good understanding before promoting them into corporate workers from the floor, is because they understand how it's done, and they know that when they get into those corporate roles, they have that in there. And look, organizations do. I know some people like, scrunch their face at the sound of role playing, but actually some of the training around role playing, particularly when they're looking at real situations, not a made up situation from 10 years, and bringing that up is really, really important. The third way to engage and try and retain some of your key salespeople is to make sure that you do incentives. And perhaps if they do better than some of the others, having some incentives or perks. Now, if you didn't tune in to my LinkedIn Live from last week, I gave over 450 tips in terms of the different types of perks, some that are free, some that are low cost, some that are higher cost, that are available in terms of being able to provide incentives. I would so suggest that you have a look at that. And so if you just find me on LinkedIn and go into my profile, you'll be able to find that recording that is over 50 different types of incentives. But some of those incentives, a couple of them that I really want to focus on are free. One of them is praising them, seeing them do something right in front of other employees and saying, congratulations, well done. Sometimes they can be really low cost. So they might be a $20 gift voucher to something. And one of the things I keep saying to people is rather than buy gift vouchers to alcohol or to things that you don't know people are going to use, give them well-being ones. Even if it's a local shop, even if it's a Costco voucher, something, or a fuel voucher, petrol/fuel voucher, something that they will use a lot more rather than sending them across to alcohol. And I keep saying, go to the wellness. The other thing to really think about if you don't want to lose key salespeople is don't blame the stores and salespeople when your numbers are down. The one way to really demotivate your people is by saying, and not praising them when they're up or giving them the praise, but really saying to them, this is not great. And when people get given negative feedback after negative feedback after negative feedback, they will actually start to lose interest, lose motivation in terms of how to work for you. There is a great Stephen Covey example that talks about that feedback and giving them negative feedback is a 4-to-1 ratio. You need to give 4 lots of positive feedback before you can make a withdrawal, a bit like you would have money in the bank on a debit card and you make that withdrawal. Don't blame people. Sit there and listen. Don't reprimand people. Don't embarrass people in front of others. And one of the things you want to do is sit down and talk through what they believe that is not working, what they believe is the solution. And if you agree or disagree, then talk through a number of solutions and come up with a bit of an action plan. The other thing, and again, this is going to sound very simple, but I'm amazed at how many organizations and teams don't do that well, is avoid verbal abuse. So one of the things that happens is having an on-call scheduling of an employee that wasn't hired, or people that request time off. I know that sometimes people need time off. I know that some of you might be listening, have smaller teams or smaller businesses where you can't afford some of those people, but just keep checking in on people, making sure that their mental health is okay, making sure that their mental wellness is okay, not going into how many days they're taking. If they're starting to take some days off, go back and have a one-on-one conversation, or have one of your team members have a conversation with them, or have your HR team have a conversation with them and saying, hey, before we go into judgment, what are some of the things that are happening? Why are some of the reasons that you're taking? Look, they might be suffering from a mental health issue. They might have an aging parents issue. They might have childcare issues. Always seeking to understand before you pass the judgment is so, so crucial. The sixth and the second last tip that I want to talk to you about, particularly around salespeople, is making sure that they've got the autonomy. Now, the autonomy doesn't mean you go out and do everything. There are some boundaries and rules of delegation and authorities of delegation. So they might be allowed to give away a certain amount of money. They might be allowed to, talk to people about certain contracts around certain dollar values, but make sure that they have the opportunity to act. If they've constantly got to go back and run things by their managers get super busy. Salespeople love having the autonomy and understanding what their boundaries are. So if you've got high-performing people, look at what they've been able to achieve. Either expand some of their autonomy or reinforce it to make sure that they can get most of the work done. And it's only when it's 10%, 5 or 10% of the issues that they can't solve, that's when they need to come back to their manager to seek that authority. And the last thing that I want to talk about is actually the issue becomes not only the salespeople, but also training your managers to become mentors. And I know that this whole thing of the coaches has been around for a long time. I always say mentor the managers. Train the managers to become mentors. If you want to actually have great salespeople and retain them, they love constant feedback, sometimes even after every individual call or a particular day. Teaching and training your managers to become mentors will really help them, asking questions, diving deeper, making sure that if there are some issues and hurdles, they can help them. But a lot of the time when you step into the mentoring role, the manager, it does not keep problem solving. The manager now becomes a confidant, a sounding board, somebody that generates questions and helps that salesperson become better at it. I hope if you are doing already some of them, I hope one of those tips really helped you. If you ever want to have a question, my brand is called Ask Shivani. Please go to askshivani.com, pop in an inquiry, and I'd be so happy to jump on a call and be able to help you. Thanks for listening. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Ask Shivani podcast, where I got to ask some questions. Thank you so much for listening. Please follow Ask Shivani on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And if you haven't done so, please go to the Apple podcast and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It would mean a lot. Thank you.